found in Isaiah 53, verse 6. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Thank you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? All right. Sheila, Phyllis, how does November 25th work? Full concert? Yeah? No? Oh man, I tried. Okay. Well, I'll try again. Today I wanted to take just a little bit of time for reflection on a common verse. I don't want to take a tremendous amount of time, but when I kind of read through this, I try to think as much as I can through what it really means. And I know that many of us have probably read through it a few times, but still, here we go. It's a very common verse. We've read it a lot. We use it a lot to show that Jesus was prophesied in the Old Testament. But have you ever meditated on it and what it actually meant for Jesus to go through this as Isaiah is talking about him? I was trying to put it within the context of our world today and what I see happening in the world today and how Jesus would have dealt with all of the things that are happening in the world today and how different my response is. I mean, you guys have seen some of the just not useless, but just like, meaningless attacks on people. People love just posting these videos of random people running up and smacking the living daylights out of people in the streets and knocking them down, and just rampant, unnecessary, meaningless violence for no other reason, and it's fun. People getting attacked on subways and trains and buses and whatever types of public transportation. Saw a video of a wreck that happened on the highway, and some people stopped, and rather than helping, they were robbing every single car that was wrecked in this accident in California. Stores, just people walking in, taking stuff, and nobody's doing anything anymore. Just all of this stuff going on. And my tendency generally is to get more defensive, more protective. Maybe I need to be trained more. Maybe I need a gun. Maybe I need some pepper spray. By the way, I bought some. Because if something's going wrong, you treat it with vegetables. It's our solution, pepper spray. It's the healthy way. But how does Jesus deal with these things? How did Jesus deal with the useless and meaningless violence that was perpetrated on him? What did he face it with? How did he respond to it? And so I want to take some time and I want us to think about, if Jesus were next to me today, going through these scenes that I see, how would he respond to that? And how can I learn to respond to that and maybe even view it in that way? Because if you're thinking that you're going to respond the right way when things happen, think again. But if you allow God to form your view of how you see people, no matter how they treat you, then you'll have a better chance of responding the way that he did. Because the reason that he did what he did was because of the way that he saw us, the way that he viewed us, the way that he thought of us, the way that he made his mind in regards to us before. He already knew. Jeremiah tells us, I know the thoughts that I think towards you. God has known the thoughts that he's thought towards us. And that's why his behavior was what it was. So we begin in Isaiah 53. We'll start in verse 1. But let's go ahead and open up with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, as we come before you this morning, I just pray that you would lead us through your word, that you would reveal to us what you are like, that we, O Lord, would have our hearts broken by your love, by your humility, by your care for us. And Lord, as we take time to remember all that it is that you've done for us, may it stir within us, O Lord, a desire to do something to at least the smallest of extents to others in like manner. I praise you, Lord, for your goodness. I ask for your Spirit. May you lead us, guide us in all wisdom and truth. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, this verse oftentimes is, the title here says, Man of Sorrows. So it's not necessarily a happy chapter. And I'm not going to try to make it a happy chapter. The results of this sorrow, however, are joyous. It's sad that this is what has happened, that this is the type of treatment that humans like to render to others, especially their Creator. But at the same time, it's joyous in that God dealt with us not according to the way that we deserved. But yet it still requires some serious reflection. And what I mainly want us to focus on is what is true humility. Because if you think you're humble, well, then you have a problem already. Who hath believed our report? And to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? Off the bat, it's already a little bit of a reach in the realm of desperation. No one, who's believed us? Who's going to believe this? Who? No one. And suffice it to say, Isaiah seems to reflect what John chapter 1 said. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. They didn't believe he was the Messiah either. Who's believed the report? Who believed the report of the shepherds? Who believed the report of the wise men? Mary took these things and hid it in her heart. Mary and Joseph knew these things, and yet, oftentimes they still wondered. Who's believed, right? When they came, and Simeon, old man, began to break down and reflect on the prophecies of Jesus and say, I have waited all my life, and God showed me that I would not die until I see the Anointed One. He knew what he was looking at, and the whole temple was listening to this Simeon, old man, speak. Who believed him? Nobody. Nobody. For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and we shall see him. And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Now some people have said that this is in relation to the way that his physical appearance was. I'm not inclined to believe that. I don't think Mary was ugly, and I don't think the Holy Spirit gave bad genetics. I think he was a decent-looking person. I think what it's talking about is that there's nothing externally that would attract people to him in regards to position or authority or wealth. Nothing that he could offer you that would make you more comfortable in this life. Because to be quite frank, there's always something that we want from somebody, and if that somebody has nothing, then we get from them. He had nothing that we wanted, but he had everything that we needed. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. It doesn't mean that he was sad. It means that he related to all those that were in pain. He was acquainted with our griefs, and in many ways he bore them himself. I'm inclined to believe that when Jesus healed, in many times, if not all the time, he took that illness, as it were, upon himself. He took that pain upon himself. He absorbed somehow whatever ailment that person had upon himself. He bore the burdens in a very literal sense. man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid as if it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Here's someone that is relating to us in our lowest points of life, when no one else will or no one else cares, and yet he's still an embarrassment to us. We'd prefer not to associate. I don't want to be seen with his ilk or the like. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Those were not his problems that he had. Those were not his burdens that he created. Those were our burdens that we gave to him and he took upon himself. And yet we looked at him and his pitiful state and thought, well, you deserve that. God's punishing you. And yet we didn't take into account that it was his faults. It was ours. We were claiming our rights while he was rendering his, surrendering his. Jesus had every right to stand up for his rights, and yet he never did, because he knew that for him to stand up for his rights was to take them from you and me. But to allow us to have them, he gave up his. There's nothing free in this world. Not everybody can have their rights. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. You know, think about this. He was punished for what you and I did. He was punished for what you and I did. And I was just like imagining this scene in my mind of maybe one of the things that happens these days. Maybe some gangsters coming and mugging some person. And they're there beating him, right? Already took his stuff, but still there beating him. And somebody's calling the police, and the police come up. And they walk right past these 2 or 3 guys beating this person. And here's this one person who's standing there, the one with the phone who called the police. And the police take him down and arrest him and put him in the car. And those people are still beating that man. That's us. That man going into the back of that cop car is Jesus. He's getting punished for not only what we did, but what we continue to do. And yet, what we find in this chapter is that there's no bitterness towards us in that regard. None. You don't see it, you won't see it. I dare you to find it. We're bitter when we get our just desserts. And yet Jesus, when he got chastised, when he got punished for what we were guilty of, he bore no ill will. He wasn't negative about it. He wasn't bitter about it. He didn't look at you differently somehow, as if I can't believe that. How dare they? Never changed. Whether you were the most loving child of God ever, or whether you were the most rebellious on the face of the planet, the same eyes look at you. And that's hard to understand. But the same eyes are looking at you. And it says that with his stripes, that is to say, with the punishment that he received on our behalf, somehow that brings to us healing. That's something I still don't understand. There's concepts that make sense, but still, even though some things make sense, some of the reasons behind it, still a little far beyond me. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. including those that will never acknowledge God as God, including those that will never come to God, including those that will hate God with all of their might and passion and being, those that will denounce him, those that will run to Satan and receive all of the gifts of the world that they could possibly obtain. Those were also laid on him, and he accepted it. He accepted it even for those that were willing to reject him, whether past, present, or future. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, and then here we go. Yet he opened not his mouth. How many of you guys complain? And sometimes we'll play games like, well, I have reason to complain, but I'm not going to complain. You know, we like to seem all mature. Look at my great character. I have all these things going wrong, but I'm okay. But you know, in the back of our mind, we're just fooling ourselves. We're training ourselves not to complain, but we know our inclination is to complain, to say things like, well, that's not fair, right? Can't believe that's happening. Can't believe he did that, said that, whatever. But you know, when I see Jesus not opening his mouth, I don't see it as a mere act. I see it as a result of him not taking offense at all. That's a big deal. That's a big deal, to be in a place where you don't take offense at the things that have been done to you, unjustifiably so, at all. And somehow receiving upon yourself that which someone else should have received, and them not receiving it at all. You see, not only did he not open his mouth in complaint when he had every single right to do so, it says that he was brought as a lamb to the slaughter. And as sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. Once again, he didn't open his mouth even when he was being slaughtered as a sheep. Said nothing. Peter pulls out a sword and slices the servant's ear, and Jesus says, listen, do you not think that I could have commanded my Father and he would send me 12 legions of angels? But this is not the way that I'm intending to fight. I'm intending to show the world just how unjust it is. I'm intending to reveal to the world that it assumes that it's living in light, but it's walking in darkness. And yet, I'm also showing the world that though it is guilty, I do not condemn it. That requires a level of humility that you and I have no idea about. We want to stand up. Jesus was laying it down. But we think that this needs to be done because it's just. Jesus let us know that there's many unjust things that will happen in this world, and yet he's willing to forego justice upon himself so that others might have an opportunity at justice in the future. That requires some really real trust and some very real humility. And I want you to understand that this is not weakness. This is meekness. The difference between weakness is succumbing when you do not have the power to do anything about it. Meekness is laying it down when you have the power to do something about it. Jesus had the power to do something about it, and he chose not to. He could have called 12 legions of angels and overthrown all the armies and set up his own kingdom and done every single thing. He could have done that, and he would have been justified in doing that. He's the one with all power. All power and authority is given to me on heaven and earth. He's not scared. He's not a coward. He's not weak. He's not powerless. But he is something. He is loving towards you and to me in a way that I don't think we can comprehend. And so what level of humility does it take to lay down your rights, to be willing to be judged unjustly, treated unfairly, and to see the perpetrators go and not even thank you for it? He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. And this is interesting. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. And when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. What's interesting is that Jesus was cut off from the generation. Who gets to see the generation of Jesus? He was cut out of the land of the living. But there is a generation of Jesus. Those that see his offering, those that see his sacrifice, those that accept the things that he's done, and make his soul an offering. He shall see the travail of his soul, and he shall be satisfied when he sees that there are those that have responded, that his example of love towards mankind has appealed to someone. That's the joy that he gets, and that's the joy that we can have. It's amazing that he was willing to go through so much, knowing that so few, so little would respond, and yet to him, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. This is a hard one. Because he's not really... We're not justified in the things that we do, but because of what he's done, he's giving us his justification. And that transfer of justification from them who done no wrong to them who's done wrong is justification enough for God. And I don't get that, because I quite frankly don't think that if I've done no wrong and you've done something wrong, that I should somehow give up my rights towards being free to you and take upon you your punishment. I don't find that justified. Yet to God it is, to those that believe, to those that wake up and see what it is God was intending to do through all of this, and recognize God is calling us to a life of humility, because quite frankly, God is everything and became nothing. And we are nothing, and we think we're all that, and we somehow deserve something. And when we recognize, oh, maybe I'm not all that, Jesus says, good, because I want to give you all of that. But you also have to become nothing, because by becoming nothing, I then have the justification to raise you up, just as I did my son Jesus. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death. This is what God calls strength. This is what God calls strength. He looks upon his son Jesus and he sees power. Power not to be overcome. Power to persevere through all opposition. To not complain. To not be bitter. To not be overcome by the overwhelming opposition of everybody hating you and denying you and rejecting you when you gave them everything and they gave nothing. That requires some real power that you and I do not have. We think it's power that we can step on somebody. No, Jesus says it's power when somebody steps on you and you're not crushed. That's power. He was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. There's a lot more that I didn't take time to reflect in here, but I would recommend that we spend some time in Isaiah 53 and recognize what Jesus not only did, but continues to do, because his thoughts still haven't changed towards us, and our behavior towards him still haven't changed. His willingness to still justify those that come to him and to offer his righteousness to those who are guilty and undeserving is still the same. But there's a but. When you see the way that Jesus lived, when you see the way that he conducted himself in the midst of all opposition and violence and torture and conflict, the words, the abandonment, the accusations, all of it, significantly more than anything you and I will ever face, no matter how violent the world gets. You can't be scared of how bad the world's going to get, because it's not going to treat you worse than it did the Son of God. And yet, we're going to have to learn some humility in responding to the things around us, to some extent, that we see Jesus and how he responded to the things around him. Because the persecution against Jesus has never stopped. It's existed since the fall. And none of you have gone through 6,000 plus years of persecution. None of you have gone through 6,000 plus years of rejection. None of you have gone through 6,000 plus years of being cursed. But Jesus has, and he still loves us. He still cares for us. He still wants us. As we take some time going through the ordinance of humility, as always, it's not that humbling in comparison to the extent that Jesus humbled himself. And so I've taken this time that we could focus a little bit on Jesus' humility, true humility, in a way that might be beyond us, but we're still called to. So I pray that we take some time as we're going through these various symbols of Christ's ministry on earth and his work on our behalf, that we would think on these things and show appreciation to God at the very least for what he was willing to do for us. We're now going to be splitting up and going to do foot washing. Afterwards, we'll be back in here